They threw me to the ground in front of 200 guests at my own daughter's wedding. Nobody knew I had paid for every single cent of that $200,000 party. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for just a second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carmen. I'm 65 years old, and until 6 months ago, I cleaned offices in the glass towers of Midtown Manhattan. My hands are rough from scrubbing floors. My knees crack when I walk. But my heart had remained intact all these years. Until that Saturday in May that changed my life forever. It was 6 in the morning when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. The sound woke me from a restless dream where I saw my daughter, Sophia, walking down the aisle in her French lace gown, the same one I had paid for by working double shifts for 8 months. In the dream, she smiled at me with that smile I'd known since she was 5 years old. When she would hug my legs after I came home from work and say, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you just like you take care of me." But the text I read in the early morning light had nothing to do with that promise. "Carmen, I've decided I don't need you to come so early. The ceremony starts at 4. Get there at 3:30. And please don't bring that old canvas bag you always carry. I bought you something more appropriate. Signed, Sophia." I read the message 3 times, feeling each word prick my chest like tiny pins. That canvas bag had been my companion for 15 years. In it, I carried my blood pressure medication, pills for my back pain, my worn rosary beads, and the photo of my mother I always kept with me. But more than that bag represented who I was. A simple woman who had sacrificed everything so her daughter could marry like a princess. I got out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold floor of my small apartment in Astoria, Queens. It was a humble 2-bedroom place where the street noise seeped in through poorly sealed windows. The walls were covered with photos of Sophia from infancy to now. Her first communion, her graduation, the day she introduced me to Robert, her fiancé. In every photo, I was there. Always in the background, always on the sidelines, but always present. I walked to the kitchen and made my morning coffee. Instant coffee, nothing fancy, but hot and strong, just how I liked it. As I stirred the spoon, I remembered the conversation I had with Sophia 6 months earlier when she announced her engagement. "Mom, Robert is a lawyer. He comes from a prominent family in Greenwich, Connecticut. His mother already told me the wedding has to be at the Plaza Hotel. It's what's expected of them." I had swallowed hard. The Plaza Hotel. I had walked past that place so many times, cleaning the buildings nearby, watching elegant people go in and out, spending more on one dinner than I earned in a month. But when I saw the hopeful look in my daughter's eyes, I knew there was no other option. "How much will it cost, sweetheart?" "Well, Mom, with everything included, the flowers, the catering, the music, the photographer, Robert estimated about $200,000. $200,000. The number echoed in my head like an endless gong. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life, but I looked at Sophia, my only daughter, my reason for living, and I said the words that would change my destiny. "Don't you worry, honey. Your mother will take care of everything." What Sophia didn't know was how I would do it. What she didn't know was that the very same night, after she left to have dinner with Robert, I sat at my kitchen table with an old calculator and a notebook where I wrote down all my options. First, I sold the few pieces of jewelry I owned. The gold earrings my late husband gave me, the engagement ring I never dared to pawn, a small chain from my mother. Altogether, it got me $8,000. Next, I went to the bank where I had saved for 20 years. Dollar by dollar, coin by coin. My account had $45,000. I withdrew every cent, but I was still far short. So I did the unthinkable. I took out a mortgage on my apartment. It was the only thing I truly owned in this world, the place where I had raised Sophia, where we had been happy despite not having much. But a mother's love can overcome prudence, and I got the loan I needed. During those months of preparation, I worked harder than I ever had before. I took night shifts, cleaned houses on the weekends, and even sold homemade food to my neighbors. My hands were covered in cuts and blisters. My legs swelled so much that some nights I couldn't sleep from the pain. But every time I saw Sophia trying on dresses or choosing flowers, every time I saw her smile, I felt it was all worth it. However, something had changed in my daughter during those months. Her visits became less frequent. When she did come, she no longer stayed for coffee like she used to. She only talked about the wedding, about the expectations of Robert's family, about how important it was to fit in to this new world. "Mom, Robert's mother says you need to buy a proper dress. Something elegant, not like the clothes you usually wear. Mom, could you not mention that you clean offices for a living? Maybe just say you're a homemaker. Mom, when you meet Robert's family, try not to talk so much. Sometimes the things you say can sound—" She never finished those sentences. But I understood the message. My daughter was ashamed of me, of my background, of who I really was. And though every word hurt like a slap, I kept quiet and nodded, thinking it was just wedding jitters. Now, on that Saturday morning, as I finished my coffee and reread her text about the canvas bag, something inside me began to crack. It was a small, almost imperceptible fissure, but one that would soon become a chasm that would change everything. I showered with the lukewarm water from my old shower head, put on the navy blue dress I had bought especially for the occasion, and looked at my reflection in the stained bathroom mirror. I saw a 65-year-old woman with gray hairs I could no longer afford to dye, with wrinkles that told the story of a life of hard work, but with eyes that still shone with love for her daughter. I didn't know that would be the last time I would see myself that way. I didn't know that in a few hours, the woman in the mirror would shatter into 1,000 pieces, only to be reborn completely different. I took the new leather handbag Sophia had left the week before. It felt elegant but alien in my hands. I packed my things, locked my apartment door, and walked to the subway station. The trip to the Plaza Hotel took an hour. The entire ride, I imagined the moment I would see my daughter as a bride, radiant and happy. I imagined her smile when she saw me arrive, imagined her grateful hug. I did not imagine what was actually waiting for me. When I arrived at the plaza, my eyes filled with tears at the magnificence of the place. Marble columns, crystal chandeliers hanging like stars from the ceiling, red carpets that seemed to stretch into infinity. Everything I had dreamed of for my Sophia was here, paid for with every drop of my sweat. But the receptionist looked me up and down when I said I was there for the Morrison Ruiz wedding. "Are you a relative of the bride?" she asked with a forced smile, as if she couldn't believe I could belong in that world. "I'm her mother," I replied, squaring my shoulders with all the dignity I could muster. Her eyes widened slightly, and I could see the surprise she was trying to hide. "Of course, ma'am. The ceremony will be in the grand ballroom." I walked through those gilded hallways, remembering every sacrifice that had brought me there. I remembered that December night when Sophia was 15 and got sick with pneumonia. We didn't have private health insurance, but she was delirious with a high fever. I sold my wedding ring that night to pay for the private hospital where they treated her. When she woke up 3 days later, the first thing she said was, "Mommy, where's your ring?" I lied. I told her I'd taken it to be cleaned. She never knew that to save her life, I had sold the last physical memory of her father. I also remembered when she turned 18 and wanted to study law at Columbia, but her grades weren't quite good enough for a scholarship. The prep courses cost $500 a month. I worked 3 jobs for a year, cleaning offices by day, caring for an elderly woman in the afternoons, and selling pretzels from a cart in Central Park on weekends. My feet bled inside my worn-out shoes, but Sophia got her scholarship and got into college. When she graduated, I cried with emotion watching my daughter in her black cap and gown. That day she hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for believing in me, Mom. Everything I am, I owe to you." Where had that gratitude gone? Where was the daughter who promised to take care of me when she grew up? I reached the ballroom where the ceremony was to be held, and my heart stopped. It was even more beautiful than I had imagined. White and pale pink roses decorated every corner. The chairs were draped in silk, and the altar looked like something out of a fairy tale. Every detail was perfect. Every element chosen with the care only a mother can put into her daughter's dreams. "Mrs. Carmen?" A man's voice interrupted me. I turned to see a tall, elegant man in his 40s. "I'm Edward, the event coordinator. Sophia asked me to find you a seat." He led me toward the rows of chairs, but instead of heading to the front where the parents of the bride and groom usually sit, he kept walking toward the back. "This will be perfect," he said, pointing to a chair in the 5th row, almost at the very end of the ballroom. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm the mother of the bride." Edward consulted his list with obvious discomfort. "Yes, ma'am, I know." These were the instructions I received from Miss Sophia. The 5th row. My daughter had relegated me to the 5th row at her own wedding, the wedding I had paid for entirely. I felt a lump in my throat, but I sat where he told me, watching the front rows fill with elegant strangers who spoke with the refined accents of Greenwich and the Upper East Side. 10 minutes later, Sophia arrived for the pre-ceremony photos. She was radiant in her French lace dress, her hair swept up in an elaborate style that had cost $300 at the salon alone. When she saw me, she hurried over. "Mom, you look nice," she said, but her voice sounded forced. "Listen, the photographer wants to take some family photos before the ceremony, but it will just be with Robert's family and me. You'll be in the photos at the reception, okay?" It wasn't a question. It was an order. "But honey, I am your family. I'm your mother." "I know, Mom, but, well, the photographer has a very specific style and—" Her voice trailed off when she saw my hurt expression. "Look, we'll have time for pictures later, all right?" She walked away quickly, leaving me alone among strangers who stared at me with poorly disguised curiosity. An older woman, probably Robert's aunt, leaned over to her companion and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Is that the mother?" How strange. I thought she'd be more presentable. My cheeks burned with shame, but I kept my composure. Just then, Meredith Ruiz, Robert's mother, arrived. She was an imposing woman in her 60s, with jewelry that sparkled more than the ballroom lights. She approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Carmen, my dear," she said in a condescending tone that made my skin crawl. "So wonderful to finally meet you. Sophia has told me so much about you." She extended a hand in a lace glove, and when I shook it, I noticed how quickly she pulled it back, as if my touch might contaminate her. "I hear you're a very hard worker," she continued. "It's so admirable how people from your background can get ahead with such effort." People from my background. The words hit me like slaps. This woman, who hadn't lifted a finger for her son's wedding, who hadn't contributed a single dollar, was speaking to me as if I were a maid who had come to serve the banquet. "Yes," I replied with all the dignity I could muster. "I've worked very hard so that my daughter could have the wedding she deserves." Meredith smiled maliciously. "Oh yes, Sophia told me about your contribution. It's very generous of you to help with what you can. Of course, we took care of the more significant expenses." I felt as if I'd been slapped across the face. My contribution? Help with what I could? I had paid for every single dollar of this wedding, from the invitations to the last carnation on the altar. But before I could respond, Meredith had already glided away to greet other, more important guests. The ceremony began, and I remained in my 5th row seat, watching my daughter walk down the aisle on Robert's arm. It should have been the happiest moment of my life, but all I felt was a cold emptiness in my chest. When the officiant asked who gives the bride away, it was Meredith who stood up and said, "Her family and I give her with love, her family and her." I, the mother who had raised her alone, who had sacrificed everything for her, wasn't even mentioned. During the ceremony, I watched my daughter promise to love and honor Robert, and I remembered all the times she had promised to love and care for me forever. The promises of children, I thought bitterly, are more fragile than glass. When the ceremony ended and everyone headed to the reception hall, I stayed in my seat for a moment. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to control the tears that threatened to overflow. In that silence, I could hear my own heart beating irregularly, as if it too knew that something was terribly wrong. I stood up and followed the crowd to the banquet, not knowing that the worst was yet to come, not knowing that in a few hours, the woman who had sacrificed her entire life for love would be humiliated in the cruelest way possible in front of all the guests who had enjoyed her generosity without even knowing her name. Upon entering the reception hall, I saw tables decorated with silk tablecloths, floral centerpieces that cost more than my monthly salary, and crystal glasses that sparkled under the chandeliers. Everything was perfect. Everything was elegant. Everything was exactly what I had dreamed for my daughter. But I no longer belonged in that dream. I had been made a spectator to my own sacrifice, an intruder at the party my own money had made possible. And the worst part was that my daughter seemed completely comfortable with it. The reception hall was even more impressive than where the ceremony had been held. The round tables were arranged like small islands of luxury, each with porcelain dinnerware that gleamed under the crystal lights. Waiters moved like silent dancers, serving champagne in flutes that cost more than my shoes. I searched for my name on the place cards and felt a fresh stab in my heart. Table 12, the farthest from the head table where the newlyweds would sit, almost hidden behind a decorative column. My table mates were people who clearly didn't fit into this world either. Robert's family gardener, a housekeeper for the Ruiz family, and two distant cousins who looked as uncomfortable as I did. "Are you Carmen?" An older woman with a heavy Spanish accent asked me. "I'm Maria. I've worked in the Ruiz home for 15 years. Mrs. Meredith told me you were also part of the staff." A part of the staff? That's how the groom's mother had classified me. Not as the mother of the bride, not as the woman who had made this celebration possible, but as service staff. "I'm Sophia's mother," I replied, my voice firm, though I was crumbling inside. Maria looked at me with genuine surprise. "Really? Oh my goodness, I thought, well, Mrs. Meredith said the bride's mother couldn't come because of health problems." Maria's words rang in my head like a funeral bell. Sophia had told Robert's family that I couldn't come due to health issues. She had erased me from her own wedding, invented an excuse to justify my absence. And now that I was here, she had placed me at the farthest table, mixed in with the domestic staff so no one would realize who I really was. During dinner, I watched my daughter from a distance. She laughed with the guests at the main tables, toasted with champagne that I had paid for, cut the wedding cake that had cost $2,000 of my savings. Not once did she look in my direction. It was as if I didn't exist. "The salmon is delicious," Maria commented, trying to make conversation. "Must have cost a fortune." $50 a plate, I answered without thinking. "How do you know that?" one of the distant cousins asked. I froze. I had almost revealed that I knew every detail because I had paid every bill. "I work in catering," I lied quickly. "I know the prices." After dessert, the toasts began. Robert spoke first, thanking his family for their support and love. He mentioned his parents, his siblings, his grandparents. Not a single word about me. Then Meredith took the microphone. Her amplified voice filled the hall as she spoke about love, family, and how proud she was to have been able to contribute to making this dream a reality. Contribute. She, who hadn't spent a single cent, was taking credit for making my daughter's dream come true. "We want to give special thanks to everyone who made this celebration possible," Meredith continued with her perfect smile. "To our friends, our family, and of course, to our dear Plaza Hotel for their exceptional hospitality." Applause, smiles, toasts, and I, invisible at my table in the back, felt every word as another blow to my sacrifice. Finally, Sophia took the microphone. My heart sped up. Maybe now, maybe at this moment, my daughter would acknowledge me. Maybe she would thank me publicly. Maybe she would give me the place I deserved. "Thank you all for being here on the happiest day of my life," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "I want to especially thank my new family, the Ruizes, for welcoming me with so much love and for making this wedding so perfect. Meredith, thank you for being like a second mother to me. A second mother." My daughter was calling the woman who had put my money in her account and taken credit for the wedding a second mother. I also want to thank all the people who worked tirelessly to make this day perfect. The chef, the waiters, the florists, everyone whose hard work made our dream a reality. She had put me in the same category as the hotel employees. In her speech, her own mother was part of the service staff who had worked for her wedding. Not my name, not a glance in my direction, not an acknowledgement that I even existed. After the speeches, the music started, and couples took to the dance floor. I remained in my seat, watching my daughter dance with Robert, then with her father-in-law, then with other important guests. Each song was like an eternity of loneliness. I needed to go to the restroom. I needed a moment alone to process everything I was experiencing, to try to understand how my daughter, the little girl I had raised with so much love, could treat me in such a cruel way. I walked through the hotel's corridors looking for the ladies' room, and as I passed a side lounge, I heard familiar voices. It was Sophia, talking with some of her friends from college. Honestly, it was a relief that my mother couldn't really be here, my daughter was saying. Robert and I were so afraid she would make a scene or say something inappropriate in front of his family. But you told me she did come, one of her friends replied, confused. Well, yeah, she came, but I put her at a table in the back with the staff. That way she's out of the way and I don't have to explain to anyone who she is. I mean, you guys don't get how hard it is having a mother who cleans toilets for a living. Robert comes from a very elegant family, and I couldn't let my mother ruin the image I've built. I felt as if 1,000 knives had been plunged into my chest. My own daughter was so ashamed of me that she had preferred to say I wasn't at her wedding rather than introduce me as her mother. Besides, Sophia continued with a cruel laugh I had never heard from her before, I had to lie to get her to pay for everything. I let her believe that Robert and his family would contribute, but obviously that was never the plan. Why would they spend their money when my mom was willing to mortgage her own apartment? In the end, it worked out perfectly. She paid, I got my princess wedding, and nobody has to know where the money really came from. Her friend's laughter echoed in my ears like the cackling of demons. My daughter was not only ashamed of me, she had deliberately deceived me. She had manipulated my mother's love to swindle every last dollar I had. I leaned against the corridor wall, feeling my legs go weak. 20 years of working day and night, selling everything I owned, mortgaging my future, and my daughter had planned it all like a scam. I wasn't her beloved mother sacrificing out of love. I was a useful fool who had fallen into her trap. The best part, Sophia's voice continued, is that now that I'm married to Robert, I don't have to pretend to care what she thinks anymore. I can finally live my real life, the life I deserve, without having to carry the shame of my origins. My origins. The shame of her origins. I, who had given my entire life for her, had become the shame she wanted to leave behind. I returned to the main ballroom, walking like a ghost. My table was empty. The other service guests had left early, probably because they understood their place at this celebration better than I did. I sat alone, surrounded by empty chairs, watching the important guests continue to dance, laugh, and enjoy the party that my pain had made possible. Sophia passed by my table several times during the night, but never once looked at me. It was as if she had succeeded in erasing me from her life completely. I had paid to be invisible at my own daughter's wedding. Around midnight, when I could no longer bear the torture, I got up to leave. No one noticed my departure. No one said goodbye. I walked through the gilded corridors of the hotel, past the ballroom where the music and laughter still echoed, and out onto the cold New York street. I waited for the taxi I had called, feeling my entire life crumble around me. In the leather handbag Sophia had forced me to carry, I had the keys to a mortgaged apartment, an empty bank account, and the broken heart of a mother who had just discovered she had raised a stranger. The taxi arrived, and I got in silently. The driver asked how the party was, and I couldn't answer. I had no words to explain that I had just endured the greatest humiliation of my life at the most expensive celebration I had ever paid for. I arrived at my Astoria apartment at 2 a.m. The streets were empty, save for a few young people returning from their nights out. So different from me, who was returning from the worst night of my life. I dragged my feet up the stairs, each step feeling like a mountain. When I opened the door, the silence of my home hit me with a cruelty I hadn't expected. I sat on my old sofa, the same one where Sophia had played as a child, where we had watched movies on Sunday afternoons, where she had told me about her first teenage crushes. Now that sofa was a witness to my complete destruction. I took off the shoes that had hurt my feet all night and looked at the shelf where I kept Sophia's photos. There was her 5-year-old smile when she lost her first tooth and told me that when she grew up, she would buy me a castle. Her proud face on her college graduation day. The photo where she was hugging me the day she met Robert, saying, Mom, I finally found someone who loves me as much as you do. All those photos now seemed like cruel jokes. When had my daughter learned to lie so well? When had I become her enemy? I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake until dawn, replaying every word I had heard, every humiliation I had endured. When the sun rose over New York City, I had already made the first decision of my new life. I would not answer Sophia's calls again. But the calls came sooner than I expected. At 8 in the morning, my phone started ringing. It was her. I didn't answer. She called again 10 minutes later. Then 5 minutes after that. Then she sent WhatsApp messages. Mom, why did you leave the wedding so early? Mom, answer me, I'm worried. Mom, Robert wants to thank you personally for everything you did for us. That last sentence provoked a bitter laugh. Robert wanted to thank me. The same Robert who hadn't said a word to me all night, who had allowed his mother to treat me like staff, who had participated in the charade of erasing me from the speeches. At 10 in the morning, Sophia showed up at my door. I heard her voice from the hallway. Mom, open the door. I know you're in there. For the first time in my life, I didn't open the door for my daughter. I remained on my sofa, motionless, listening as she rang the bell over and over. Mom, please. I don't know what happened yesterday, but we can talk about it. What happened? Did she really not know what had happened? After half an hour of ringing, she left. But she returned in the afternoon, this time with Robert. Mrs. Carmen, I heard his voice through the door. Please open up. Sophia is very distraught. We don't understand why you're upset. They didn't understand. They had planned my complete humiliation, used me like a cash machine, made me invisible at the wedding I had paid for, and they didn't understand why I was upset. That night, alone in my apartment, I started going through all the wedding documents. Every receipt, every contract, every invoice was in my name. I was the one who had signed with the hotel, the florists, the photographers, the caterers. Legally, I was the sole person responsible for everything that had happened at that celebration. An idea began to form in my mind. It was small at first, like a seed planted in fertile soil, but it grew hour by hour until it became something solid and powerful. The next day, Meredith arrived. I saw her from my window, stepping out of her brand new Mercedes-Benz, walking toward my building with the same arrogance she had shown at the wedding. She knocked on my door with sharp, authoritarian raps. Carmen, it's Meredith Ruiz. We need to talk. I didn't open it. I know you're in there. This childish attitude is affecting my son and his wife. Sophia is crying. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. Is this what you want? To ruin your daughter's happiness over a tantrum? A tantrum. That's what she called my pain. A tantrum. Carmen, open this door or I will have to take more drastic measures. More drastic measures. What could she do to me? I owed her nothing. She was the one who owed me. After she left, I dialed the number of a lawyer I had seen advertised in a local paper. His name was Michael A. Evans, and he specialized in family and contract law. Ma'am, let me get this straight, he said after I explained my situation over the phone. You paid for a $200,000 wedding in full. Everything is legally in your name. But you were treated like a member of the service staff? Exactly. And your daughter lied to you about who would be paying for which expenses. Yes. She tricked me into covering all the costs. There was a long pause. Mrs. Carmen, would you be willing to come to my office? I believe you have a very interesting case on your hands. That afternoon, I put on my best clothes and went to Mr. Evans' office. He was a man in his 50s, with a graying beard and intelligent eyes that immediately inspired confidence. Mrs. Carmen, he said after reviewing all my documents, what they did to you is not only morally reprehensible, but it could constitute fraud. Your daughter induced you to incur expenses under false pretenses, and then the Ruiz family publicly took credit for something you financed. What can I do? Legally, you have several options. All the contracts are in your name. All the payments came from your accounts. Technically, you are the owner of everything that was purchased for that wedding. My heart began to beat faster. What does that mean, exactly? It means that from the wedding rings to the decorations, from the bridal gown to the wedding bands, everything legally belongs to you. If we want to get technical, Your daughter and son-in-law are in possession of goods that do not belong to them. A smile formed on my face for the first time in days. And what can I do with that information? That, Mrs. Carmen, depends on how far you're willing to go to get your dignity back. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, not because I had found peace, but because I had found something much better. I had found my power. The next day, my counterattack began. I called the Plaza Hotel and asked to speak with the events manager. Sir, my name is Carmen Morales, the person responsible for the Morrison Ruiz wedding last Saturday. I need an urgent meeting to discuss some irregularities at the event. Irregularities, ma'am? Yes. I was treated like service staff when I was the one who paid for the entire celebration, and I have the invoices to prove it. There was silence on the other end of the line. Ma'am, please come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. The general manager will want to speak with you personally. I also called the photographer who had documented the wedding. The family photos you took without including the mother of the bride? I am the mother of the bride, and I paid for your services in full. I want all the original photos, and I want this mistake corrected. But ma'am, the instructions were very clear. The instructions were wrong. I hired your services. I paid for them, and I demand the product I paid for. Every call I made, every step I took, gave me back a small piece of the dignity they had stolen from me. For the first time in days, I looked in the mirror and saw something different in my eyes. I was no longer the broken woman who had returned from the wedding. I was becoming someone new. Sophia kept calling, sending messages, knocking on my door. But I had learned something it took me 65 years to discover. I don't have to open my door to someone who doesn't respect my home. I don't have to answer calls from someone who doesn't respect my voice. I don't have to give explanations to someone who never gave them to me. My daughter had made the mistake of underestimating the woman who raised her. She thought that because I had always given in, I would always give in. She thought they could use my love as a weakness to take advantage of me forever. But a mother's love, when it is perverted and abused, can turn into something far more powerful. It can turn into justice. And I was just getting started. The meeting at the plaza was my first real victory. I arrived at 10 o'clock sharp, wearing the same navy blue suit from the wedding. But this time, I walked with a dignity I hadn't felt in years. The general manager, an elegant man named Mr. Davis, received me in his office with an expression that mixed confusion with concern. Mrs. Morales, he began, looking at a thick folder. I've reviewed all the contracts for your event, and indeed, you are listed as the sole financial guarantor for the celebration. That's right, I answered in a firm voice. I paid for every dollar of that wedding, yet I was treated like service staff, placed at the farthest table, and completely excluded from the family protocols. Mr. Davis shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Ma'am, I must admit there were irregularities in the protocol. Normally, the person financing the event receives VIP treatment, regardless of who makes the reservations. Who gave you instructions to treat me that way? According to our records, both Miss Sophia and Mrs. Meredith Ruiz specifically indicated that that you had a secondary role in the celebration. A secondary role. In the wedding, I had paid for completely. Mr. Davis, I want a formal letter from the hotel acknowledging the error and offering a public apology. I also want the official event record to be corrected, where it must clearly state that I was the one who financed the celebration. Of course, ma'am. Is there anything else we can do to remedy this situation? I smiled for the first time in days. Yes. I want a copy of all the security camera recordings from the night of the wedding. I am entitled to them as the client who paid for the service. The manager paled slightly. The security recordings? I need evidence of how I was treated, for my legal records. 2 hours later, I left the hotel with an official letter of apology, the correction of the event records, and a USB drive with the security footage. For the first time in weeks, I felt powerful. The photographer was even easier to convince. When I arrived at his studio with the contracts proving I had paid for his services, he immediately agreed to give me all the original photos, including those taken without me. Ma'am, I must confess, I found it strange that the mother of the bride wasn't in the family photos, he said, as he handed me the digital files. But the instructions were very specific. Who gave you those instructions exactly? Miss Sophia and Mrs. Meredith. They told me you had health issues and preferred to stay in the background. Another lie. Another way to erase me from my own daughter's history. That night, in my apartment, I reviewed all the photos. I saw Sophia, radiant in her dress. I saw Robert smiling with his family. I saw Meredith posing as if she were the matriarch who had made the celebration possible. And then I saw the other photos, the ones they had taken without me noticing. Me alone at my table in the back. Me walking through the halls like a ghost. Me leaving the hotel with no one to say goodbye. Those photos told the real story of the wedding. An invisible mother at the celebration she had financed with her life. The next day, Sophia appeared at my door, accompanied by Robert and Meredith. This time, they didn't just ring the bell, they shouted from the street. "Carmen, come out here immediately!" Meredith's voice echoed through the neighborhood. "This behavior is unacceptable." I opened my second-floor window and looked down at them. The three of them stood on the sidewalk, dressed in elegant clothes that contrasted sharply with the simplicity of my Astoria neighborhood. "What do you need?" I asked calmly. "Mom, come down right now," Sophia yelled. "We need to talk." "We can talk from here. The whole neighborhood can hear what you have to say." Meredith stepped forward. "Carmen, I don't know what little game you're playing, but it's over. My son and my daughter-in-law have been suffering because of your childish tantrums." "My tantrums?" I took out my phone and put it on speaker. "Are you referring to the tantrum of having paid $200,000 for a wedding where I was treated like a domestic employee?" An awkward silence fell over the street. A few neighbors started to peer out of their windows and from their balconies. "Mom, come down so we can talk in private," Sophia insisted. "No, dear. I have spent 65 years of my life talking in private, giving in private, sacrificing in private. Now we're going to talk where everyone can hear the truth." Robert tried to intervene. "Mrs. Carmen, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I cut him off. "Is it a misunderstanding that you told me you would contribute to the expenses, and in the end, I paid for everything myself? Is it a misunderstanding that you seated me with the service staff? Is it a misunderstanding that you erased me from the speeches and the family photos?" More neighbors had gathered. Some were recording with their phones. The scene was becoming exactly what Sophia feared most. A public spectacle. "That's enough!" Meredith shouted. "If you don't come down immediately, we're going to call the police." I started to laugh. It was a liberating laugh, the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. "Call the police. Tell them a 65-year-old woman refuses to open her door to the people who scammed and publicly humiliated her." Sophia started to cry. "Mom, please. I'm your daughter. I love you. I just want things to go back to normal." "Normal?" My voice hardened. "You mean the normal where I work like a slave to pay for your whims while you're ashamed of me? That normal? I never said I was ashamed of you." "No?" I took out my phone again and found the recording I had made of the conversation I overheard at the hotel. "Then explain this." I put the recording on speaker. Sophia's voice echoed down the street. Honestly, it was a relief that my mother couldn't really be here. Robert and I were so afraid she would make a scene. "I mean, you guys don't get how hard it is having a mother who cleans toilets for a living." The silence that followed was absolute. Sophia turned as white as a sheet. Robert stared at the ground. Meredith clenched her fists. "I had to lie to get her to pay for everything." The recording continued. "I let her believe that Robert and his family would contribute. In the end, it worked out perfectly. She paid, I got my princess wedding, and nobody has to know where the money really came from." When the recording ended, several neighbors began to murmur indignantly. An elderly woman yelled from her balcony, "What a disgrace! Treating your own mother like that." Sophia tried to defend herself. "Mom, I was nervous. I didn't mean it." "You didn't mean it when you said you could finally live your real life without carrying the shame of your origins?" I asked, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Did you also not mean it when you said you no longer had to pretend to care what I thought?" Sophia began to sob uncontrollably. Robert took her by the arm, trying to pull her away from the scene. Meredith, for the first time since I'd met her, had nothing to say. "Sophia," I said, my voice softer but firm, "you are my daughter, and I will always love you." but I will not allow you to treat me like an ATM with feelings. I will not allow you to be ashamed of the woman who sacrificed her whole life to give you the opportunities you have. Mom, forgive me, please, she whimpered from the street. I forgive you, I answered. And it was true. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean allowing myself to be disrespected ever again. I closed the window and walked away. I heard them arguing on the street for several more minutes before they finally left. That night, for the first time in months, I made a special dinner just for myself. I bought a bottle of wine, something I had never allowed myself because I was always saving for something Sophia needed. I cooked my favorite dish, put on music that I liked, and sat down to eat alone at my table. I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. I had spent my entire life believing that love meant total sacrifice, that being a good mother meant giving everything without expecting anything in return. But that night, I understood something fundamental. True love requires mutual respect, and I had lost respect for myself by allowing others not to respect me. My phone rang several times during dinner. It was Sophia. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life, my dinner was more important than my daughter's demands. When I finished eating, I poured myself another glass of wine and toasted the woman I was beginning to discover, Carmen, 65 years old, who was worth so much more than she had ever dared to believe. 3 days after the confrontation on the street, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was the lawyer, Michael A. Evans, and his voice sounded more serious than usual. Mrs. Carmen, I need to see you in my office urgently. There have been some developments you need to know about. I arrived at his office an hour later, and his expression confirmed that the news wasn't good. The Ruiz family has hired one of the most expensive law firms in the city, he informed me, reviewing some documents. They're claiming that you are emotionally blackmailing your daughter and using your legal position to extort money from them. I felt a pang of pain in my chest. Extort? For demanding my dignity? That's not all, the lawyer continued. They're also spreading a completely different version of events. According to them, you voluntarily offered to pay for the wedding as a gift, and now you're having regrets and causing family drama. And Sophia agrees with that version? Michael showed me an official letter. Your daughter signed a sworn affidavit fully supporting the Ruiz's version. According to this document, you were never deceived. There were no false promises about who would pay for what, and your current reaction is the product of age-related mental health issues. The words hit me like punches. My own daughter had signed a legal document claiming I was mentally unwell. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, now she was betraying me legally. What can I do? Well, the good news is we have solid evidence to the contrary. The recordings, the hotel's testimony, the bank records. But Mrs. Carmen, I have to ask you, are you prepared to see this through to the end? Because this is going to be a war, and family wars are the cruelest of all. That night, alone in my apartment, I made the hardest decision of my life. I called Sophia. Mom? Her voice sounded relieved. Thank God you called. We can fix all of this. You just have to withdraw all these false accusations, and we can go back to being a happy family. False accusations? My voice came out colder than I intended. Are you referring to the recordings where you admit you deliberately deceived me? Mom, I was upset. I said things I didn't feel. You know I love you. Sophia, I need you to tell me the truth about one thing. Did you really sign a document saying I have mental health problems? There was a long silence. Too long. Sophia, I'm asking you a direct question. Mom, Meredith told me it was the only way to protect you from more serious legal trouble. She says if we don't prove you're going through an emotional crisis, you could face charges for defamation or blackmail. And you believed her? Mom, I'm confused. Robert says his lawyers know best how to handle these situations. Sophia, I said with a calm I didn't feel, tomorrow at 6 p.m., I will be at the cafe near Columbus Circle. Come alone, just you. If you truly love me, if you truly want to fix this, come alone and let's talk like a mother and daughter. And if I don't come, then I'll know you've definitively chosen your new family over the woman who gave you life. I hung up without waiting for a response. The next day felt eternal. I got up early, got ready with special care, and went for a walk through the city. I went to places I hadn't visited in years. The Met, Central Park, Grand Central Terminal. It was as if I were saying goodbye to the city where I had raised my daughter. Or maybe I was greeting a new version of myself that was being born. At 6 o'clock sharp, I was sitting at the cafe. It was an elegant yet cozy place, filled with history and important conversations. I ordered a coffee and waited. Sophia arrived 10 minutes late, and she wasn't alone. Robert was with her, staying a few feet away but clearly supervising the conversation. "I told you to come alone," I said when she sat down across from me. Robert insisted. "He says it's important to have a witness to our conversation." "A witness? What crime do you think I'm capable of, dear?" Sophia avoided my gaze. She looked as if she had aged years in the last few weeks. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled as usual, and her hands trembled slightly. "Mom, I just want this to be over. I'm tired of fighting." "Fighting?" I looked at her intently. "Honey, I'm not fighting with you. I'm defending myself from you." "From me? I'm your daughter. Biologically, you are my daughter. But you stopped acting like one a long time ago." Tears began to stream down her cheeks. "Mom, please. I promise everything can go back to how it was before." "Like before? You mean like before when I worked 3 jobs to pay for your college, and you promised you would take care of me when you were older? Or do you mean like before when I sold my wedding ring to pay for your surgery, and you told me you'd buy me a better one when you had money?" I was young, Mom. People change. You're right. People change. And I've changed too. I pulled a thick folder from my bag and placed it on the table. "What's that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's the lawsuit I'm filing tomorrow if we don't resolve this today. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, emotional distress, and defamation." Sophia turned pale. "Mom, you can't sue me. I'm your daughter. That's precisely why it hurts so much to have to." Robert approached our table. "Mrs. Carmen, this has gone far enough. You're threatening your own family." "Mr. Ruiz," I said without looking at him, "you are not part of this conversation. And I'll remind you that your family defamed me first by claiming I have mental health issues." "Mom, we don't want to go to court," Sophia cried out, attracting the attention of other patrons. "Then tell me what you want, dear. Tell me what you're willing to do to fix the damage you've caused me." Sophia looked at Robert, then at me, then back at Robert. It was clear she was torn between her husband's instructions and whatever shred of love for her mother she might still have. I could apologize to you publicly," she finally said. "You could. I will. I'll apologize to you publicly. And what else? What else do you want?" "I want every single dollar I paid for that wedding returned to me." "That's impossible," Robert interjected. "We don't have that money anymore." "Then sell the apartment you bought with the money you had left over," I retorted without hesitation. "How do you know about the apartment?" Sophia asked in shock. I smiled bitterly. "Honey, when someone pays $200,000 for a wedding, and suddenly the newlyweds buy a $300,000 apartment 2 months later, you don't have to be a detective to connect the dots." Sophia's expression confirmed my suspicions. They had used my money not only for the wedding, but also as a down payment for their new home. "We bought that apartment with a loan," Robert lied. I took out my phone and showed him a screenshot. "A loan? According to the public property records, you bought that apartment in cash. No mortgage." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia began to cry inconsolably, and Robert seemed to be desperately searching for a credible explanation. "You have 2 options," I said calmly, putting my phone away. "Option 1, you return all the money you stole from me, you apologize publicly, and you never contact me again unless it's to show me the respect I deserve. Option 2, we see each other in court and we let a judge decide." "And if we choose option 1? Sophia asked, her voice breaking. "Then maybe with time, I can learn to trust you again. Maybe I can believe again that my daughter has a piece of the woman I tried to raise. And if we choose to do nothing?" I stood up from the table and gathered my things. "Then tomorrow you'll discover that the woman who cleans toilets for a living has also learned how to clean up the mess in her own life." I walked toward the cafe's exit, but before leaving, I turned back one last time. "Sophia, for 65 years, I have lived for you. For 65 years, I put your needs before my own. For 65 years, I believed that was love. Today, I learned that it was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being needed. Fear of not being loved. Mom, but I'm not afraid anymore. I would rather be alone with my dignity than surrounded by people who don't respect me. I walked out of the cafe and onto the streets of New York, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades. Complete freedom. 2 weeks passed in silence after the meeting at the cafe. There were no calls, no messages, no appearances at my door. For a moment, I thought that perhaps Sophia had chosen dignity and was preparing her public apology along with the return of the money. How naive I was. On Friday morning, my neighbor Pilar knocked on my door with a look of concern that immediately put me on alert. "Carmen, honey," she said in a low voice, "I think you need to see this." She handed me her tablet, which was open to Facebook. What I saw took the air from my lungs. It was a post by Sophia, shared over 200 times with a photo of me taken without my permission during the confrontation on the street. I was shown yelling from my window, my hair disheveled, and an expression of fury that, taken out of context, made me look like an unhinged woman. The text of the post was even worse. "It is with a broken heart that I share this with you. My mother, Carmen, is going through a very serious mental health crisis. After my wedding, she began to have episodes of paranoia and aggression. She's convinced that my husband and I stole money from her, when in reality she generously offered to help with some expenses as a wedding gift. Now she's threatening to sue us and has started harassing my husband's family. We have tried to get her professional help, but she refuses. Please, if you see her exhibiting erratic behavior, do not confront her. She is unwell and needs compassion. Mental health, family crisis, unconditional love." I read the post 3 times, unable to believe what I was seeing. My own daughter had publicly painted me as mentally ill, completely distorted the facts, and managed to make hundreds of strangers see me as a deranged old woman harassing her own family. The comments were even more devastating. "That's terrible, Sophia. It's so hard dealing with family members with mental health issues. You are so brave for sharing this. Sometimes age brings on these problems. My grandmother went through something similar. She needs medication, urgently. Poor thing. She must feel lonely, and that's why she's making up these stories. My reputation, built over 65 years of honest work and sacrifice, had been destroyed in a single post. Sophia had turned my fight for dignity into evidence of insanity. She had transformed my pain into a public spectacle. But what hurt the most was seeing who had liked and shared the post. Neighbors from my block, former co-workers, even some of the mothers from the school where Sophia went as a child. People who knew me, who knew what I was really like, had chosen to believe my daughter's version without question. I immediately called my lawyer. "Michael, I need you to see something urgently," I told him, my voice trembling. "I've already seen it, Mrs. Carmen. Several clients sent me the link this morning. This is pure and simple defamation. What can I do? We can sue for defamation, damage to reputation, and publication of an image without consent. But ma'am, I must warn you, this is going to be a very public battle. Your daughter has decided to play dirty." That afternoon, as I walked through my neighborhood trying to clear my head, I noticed how people's gazes had changed. Some people averted their eyes when they saw me. Others watched me with a mixture of pity and caution. The owner of the corner deli, where I'd shopped for 20 years, spoke to me in a condescending tone, as if I were a small child. "How are you today, Mrs. Carmen? Feeling all right?" "I'm perfectly fine, Mauricio. Why do you ask?" "Well, we saw the news online." The news. My life had become online news. That night, when I thought I had hit rock bottom, I received a call that sent a chill down my spine. It was a caseworker from Adult Protective Services. "Mrs. Morales, my name is Carlos Mendoza from APS. We've received a report expressing concern for your mental and physical well-being." "A report from whom?" "I cannot disclose the identity of the reporter, but they have expressed concern that you may be a danger to yourself or others." A danger. My own daughter had filed an official report suggesting I was a danger. "Mr. Mendoza, I assure you, I am perfectly fine." "I understand, ma'am, but we need to conduct a home assessment. It's standard procedure. Could we schedule a visit for tomorrow?" After I hung up, I sat on my sofa, and for the first time in weeks, I cried. I didn't cry from sadness, but from a rage so deep my entire body trembled. Sophia hadn't been content with stealing my money, publicly humiliating me, and destroying my reputation. Now she was trying to have the authorities declare me incompetent. But in the midst of that rage, something more powerful began to grow inside me. It wasn't pain. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't despair. It was pure determination, crystallized by years of silence and fueled by decades of unrequited love. I got up from the sofa, dried my tears, and did something I never thought I would do. I created my own Facebook account. I spent the entire night writing. I wrote the whole story, from the first dollar I saved for Sophia when she was 5 years old, to the wedding I paid for in full without any recognition. I included photos of all the receipts, screenshots of the bank transfers, the recording of the conversation at the hotel, and the official apology from the Plaza Hotel. But most importantly, I included the photos the photographer had given me. Me, alone at the back table, walking like a ghost through the celebration I had financed, leaving without a single goodbye. At dawn, I published my response. My name is Carmen Morales. I am 65 years old, and I have worked my entire life cleaning offices to give my daughter the education and opportunities I never had. Yesterday, that same daughter publicly portrayed me as mentally ill to hide the fact that she scammed me out of $200,000 and humiliated me at her own wedding. This is my full story, with all the evidence to back up every word. You be the judge of who is lying. I don't have a mental health problem. I have a problem with a daughter who learned that money is worth more than love, and that social status matters more than family dignity. Sophia, if you're reading this, your plan partially worked. You got some people to see me as crazy, but you didn't break me. For 65 years, I lived for you. Now, I'm going to live for me. And to everyone who shared her post without knowing the full truth, this is how you destroy an innocent person's life. This is how defamation on social media works. This is how a well-told lie can be more powerful than a poorly defended truth. The post went viral within hours. Thousands of supportive comments, hundreds of shares, local journalists asking for interviews. But the most incredible thing was that several mothers began to share similar stories in the comments. Daughters who were ashamed of their origins, sons who had used their mothers financially, families who had betrayed those who loved them most. My story had touched a deep wound in society. The silent epidemic of elderly parents being abandoned and abused by the children for whom they had sacrificed everything. When the social worker arrived at my apartment the next day, he had already seen my post and all the evidence I had shared. "Mrs. Morales," he said with an embarrassed smile, "I believe there has been a very serious misunderstanding here. After reviewing all the available information, it's clear that you are not in need of any kind of mental evaluation. And what about the false report? That will be investigated separately. Filing a false report with social services is a serious offense." That afternoon, as I read the thousands of supportive comments that continued to pour in, my phone rang. It was Sophia. I didn't answer. She called again, and again, and again. Finally, I accepted the call. "Mom," her voice was desperate. "We need to talk. This has gotten out of control." "It's gotten out of control?" My voice was calmer than I felt. "Honey, you took control when you decided to paint me as a crazy person. I just reclaimed my right to tell my own story." "But Mom, now the whole country knows our family business." "Exactly. And now the whole country knows who is lying and who is telling the truth. Please delete that post. I'll give you the money back. I'll apologize, but please, just delete the post." For the first time in my life, my daughter was begging me. "You know what, Sophia? I'm going to do something you never did for me. I'm going to think about it." And I hung up. For the first time in 65 years, I held all the power in my relationship with my daughter. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I wanted to use it. 6 months after that desperate call from Sophia, I'm sitting on the terrace of my new apartment in the West Village, sipping my morning coffee while looking out at a view I never thought I could afford. The money I recovered through the legal process not only returned what was stolen, but taught me the true value of my sacrifice. I never deleted my Facebook post. It became the starting point for something I never imagined. Hundreds of mothers and fathers began contacting me, sharing similar stories of children who had used, humiliated, and abandoned them. A talk show invited me as a special guest, then another, and then another. Without meaning to, I had become the voice for silenced parents. I founded an association we called Family Dignity, where we help older parents who have been victims of financial or emotional abuse by their own children. We have volunteer lawyers, psychologists, and above all, a support network where no one has to go through this alone. The irony is beautiful. My daughter, who was ashamed of having a mother who cleaned toilets, now has a mother who appears on national television talking about family dignity and respect. The woman she wanted to hide is now more publicly recognized than she is. This morning, like every day for the past few months, I received calls from grateful mothers. Anna, from Chicago, told me she finally confronted her son who had emptied her savings account. Maria, from Miami, got her daughter to return the family jewelry she had borrowed 5 years ago. Each of their victories is a victory for me, too. My apartment now reflects who I really am, not who I thought I had to be. Books I always wanted to read but never had time for because I was working for Sophia. Paintings I bought because I loved them, not because they were practical. A kitchen where I prepare elaborate meals just for myself, because after 65 years, I've learned that I deserve to be cared for too. The doorbell interrupts my morning thoughts. I'm not expecting anyone, but when I open the door, my heart stops for a second. It's Sophia, but it's not the confident, arrogant Sophia I knew. She's gaunt, with deep dark circles under her eyes, and her clothes, while still elegant, lack the same obsessive care as before. Her hands tremble slightly as she holds a bouquet of flowers I recognize immediately. White roses, the same ones I used to buy her when she was sick as a little girl. "Hi, Mom," she says, her voice cracking. "Sophia." I don't invite her in, but I don't close the door either. Can I come in? Please." I let her pass, and I notice her eyes scanning my new home. She sees the framed certificates from awards I've received, the photos of me with other mothers at the association's events, the stacks of books I'm reading. She sees, for the first time in years, a whole woman, not just a sacrifice machine. "The apartment is beautiful," she says, and for the first time in a long time, her voice sounds genuine. "Thank you." She sits on the edge of the sofa, as if she doesn't feel she has the right to get comfortable. The roses rest awkwardly in her lap. "Mom, I came because I need you to know that." Her voice breaks completely. "Robert left me." I don't feel the vengeful satisfaction I thought I would at hearing those words. Instead, I see a 31-year-old woman who is learning far too late the price of cruel decisions. "Why?" I ask, though I think I already know the answer. He says I'm not the woman he fell in love with anymore, that I've become obsessive, paranoid, that I spend all my time worrying about what people think of us after everything that happened. And his family? His family blames me for the public scandal. They say I should have handled the situation with you more discreetly. Her lips twist with bitterness. Meredith doesn't speak to me anymore. She says I brought shame to the Ruiz family name. The irony is almost poetic. The woman who was ashamed of me is now rejected by the family she chose over her own. And the apartment? We lost it. We had to sell it to pay the lawyers and the settlement. Robert took his half, and I was left with debt. A long silence falls. Sophia weeps quietly, and I watch my daughter, because despite everything she is still my daughter, face the consequences of her own choices. "Why have you come to me now?" I finally ask. "Because..." She wipes her tears with the back of her hand, a childish gesture that for a second takes me back to the little girl I used to comfort. "Because I realize that the only person in this world who ever loved me unconditionally, I was the one who destroyed her. You didn't destroy me, Sophia. You freed me." She looks at me in confusion. "For 65 years, I lived believing my worth depended on how much I could sacrifice for you. You taught me that my worth is independent of what others need from me. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to know that I am sorry. I am sorry every single day. I forgive you," I say, and it's true. I forgive you because holding on to resentment would only hurt me, not you. Her eyes light up with hope. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, I continue. And it definitely doesn't mean going back to the relationship we had before. Then what does it mean? I stand up and walk to the window overlooking the bustling West Village street. Below, life goes on. Mothers taking their children to school, old men walking their dogs, young people rushing to their jobs. Real life, the life I missed for decades because I was too busy serving a daughter who didn't value me. It means you can be a part of my life if you prove, with actions, not words, that you have learned to respect me, I say without turning to her. It means you will have to earn your place in my new life, just as I had to earn my place in my own existence. How can I do that? I turn to face her. That's a question you'll have to answer for yourself. I'm not going to give you all the answers anymore. Sophia stands up slowly. Can I call you sometimes? You can try. But understand that I have a full life now. I have responsibilities to hundreds of mothers who need my help. I have books to read, places to visit. A version of myself I'm still discovering. She heads for the door, but then stops. Mom, will you ever be able to love me like you did before? The question hurts me, but not in the way it used to. It hurts with the compassion one feels for someone learning a necessary but difficult lesson. Sophia, I never stopped loving you, but I learned to love myself too, and that is a love I will never sacrifice for anyone again. After she leaves, I sit back down on my terrace with a second cup of coffee. The day is beautiful. New York is waking up with its characteristic energy. And I have an interview on NPR this afternoon where I'll be talking about the importance of self-care for senior citizens. My phone rings. It's a mother from Texas who needs advice on how to confront her son who has been manipulating her financially. I answer the call with a smile. Hello, this is Carmen. I'm listening. As I help her plan her liberation strategy, I look out the window and think about how strange life is. For decades, I believed my purpose was to be Sophia's perfect mother. It turns out my true purpose was to become the mother that all mistreated women needed. Sometimes the deepest betrayals lead us to the most unexpected destinies. Sometimes losing one daughter teaches us how to gain hundreds. Sometimes the end of one story is actually the beginning of a much bigger one. Tonight, like every night for the past 6 months, I will go to sleep knowing that my life has value beyond what I can give to others. I will wake up tomorrow with my own purpose, not one defined for me by others. And if Sophia one day truly learns to love me with respect, she will be welcome in this new life I have built. But if she doesn't, I will be fine either way. Because finally, at 65 years old, I have learned the most important lesson of all. I don't need anyone else to choose me, because I have finally chosen myself. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced something like this? Or do you know someone who has? If this story resonated with you, share it in the comments. Because maybe your comment is what another mother needs to read to find the courage to stand up for herself. And if this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Your support helps this message reach someone who truly needs to hear it.